So picking up where we left off, we were talking about the impact of globalization versus nationalization from a foreign policy, economic policy perspective, and what that means for us as Americans versus what it means for, the rest of the world, this civilian populace, right? And I want to pull up a video from one of our previous presidents, President Obama. He had his first public long-form speaking engagement for quite some time here recently, published 3 days ago. He went to Hamilton College. So I figured, I'd love to see what's going on, not just from, Donald Trump, who's president now. Love to get Barack Obama's opinion. Probably won't agree with, some of it, but, certainly an influential figure nonetheless that I would like to hear from. But
And just real quick, you said we're contrasting globalization from nationalism, not nationalization.
Yes.
Because nationalization means the government's is taking
Correct.
control of it. So we're talking about nationalism
Correct.
versus a globalization, or globalism versus nationalism.
yeah,
Okay.
thanks for correcting me there. I guess there is an element that obviously we want to work with the world around us, right? Many of our components, as we were discussing, going into our drones, into our cars, our consumer goods, even if they're made here, are coming from other countries, right? So there is an interdependence that I think there's really no way of working around to, some degree. Obviously, you don't want to be totally reliant on one country for, one, entire category of goods, whether it's clothing, whether it's agriculture, whether it's semiconductors, you don't want to have, again, all of your eggs in one basket. And I think by and large, we put all of our eggs in one basket, or in very, very, very few baskets, right? Especially from the technology perspective with China. One other tidbit before I pull up this video with former President Barack Obama, talking with our neighbor previously, who made a comment that a lot of people bring up, including myself, and in various contexts. I often like to bring it up, like, no one, if we started producing iPhones here in America, no one would want to purchase them, because it's not like, hey, you're spending $1,500 instead of $1,000 on an iPhone. Try $3,000 to $4,000 versus $1,000 for an iPhone, and maybe even more than that. And again, the conversation that I'm referring to a week ago, the night a week ago. He mentioned something about, like, you don't want a $3,000 iPhone or iPhone made here in America. And it's like, you're arguing to my point, especially when there's an attack on me basically not caring about, the average person, the person around the world even. And I just found it awfully funny from someone saying that, we're so reliant on China, like, basically we're fine with slaves as long as they're not within our borders.
Sure.
And
Yep.
to me, it's like, no, I would rather have a more expensive, consumer product if that means, American is getting purpose, and livelihood out of it, right? A good job. I mean, even I remember growing up, there was this show, Undercover Boss, on like CBS or something like that. And Fender, the music company, right? They had amps, I think Zildjian, or I don't know how to pronounce, do you know the
amplifier?
Well, there's Fender for like the amps, right? That they were making amplifiers here. There's another big amplifier company that I think was also featured, and maybe I'm Polk, maybe, but there was also, I think, Zildjian, the like cymbal manufacturer that starts with a Z, if you're familiar with them.
I think it's Zildjian.
Okay.
It's Zildjian.
And I just recall, there's a lot of those factory jobs, producing technology, that, sure, were you going to, die a multimillionaire, if that was your only source of income, probably not. But did it give you purpose in life? Did it make you feel good that, hey, someone else is using a product I had a hand in making? That's to me at least, and I find that's the case with a lot of people that, I work with, that, beyond the economic, sort of trade-offs that we're making with globalization, we're also making the trade-offs from like losing again what it means to be an American, losing the sense of purpose, from like, what value do I bring to the world, right? And if that's stripped away because, hey, well, someone else, we can force to do it for $2 an hour, so you're obviously better than that, right? Well, again, that goes into where it's not really a free market in really any case, because there's other countries, well, hey, maybe this is an opportunity we can provide for our people, and we're going to subsidize it to undercut, what's being done in America. And so
your argument, if you don't mind me interjecting, it sounds idealistic, and you can say that you don't mind paying $1,500 or $3,000 for an iPhone.
I don't. Yeah,
which would normally be $1,000 or whatever. You can say that, and the fact that it's made by American hands and American people are getting a paycheck and benefiting from it. That sounds great, but for the people in this country who are struggling to get by, it does make a difference. So that's the argument against, I think,
right,
what you're saying about.
But would you rather have a house over your head with that's yours or closer to being yours, and no iPhone, or a $3,000 iPhone, or would you rather have a $1,000 iPhone but can't afford housing? Right. And that's a very extreme case, right? I'm not saying it's either iPhone or, housing, but again, that's the trade-off that we're making. For cheap consumer goods, we're building the middle class of other countries so they can get more affordable housing and transportation. And those are the real costs that actually matter. And again, I wouldn't be happy with a $3,000 iPhone. I don't even use an iPhone right now, given, the same sort of manufacturing practices are used across most phones.
What do you
of course,
use, Android?
Yeah, this is an Android, a Google phone. Probably still made in China, but then you get Samsungs, of course, made in Korea. A lot of people don't think about this, but there's quasi-slavery in South Korea still. Again, it's nice to think that like South Korea, oh yeah, it's super civilized, first world country. There's obviously parts of America that, rightfully so, wouldn't be described as first world, right? But again, that's really my point. If we have so many of these areas within our own borders, how about let's give those people a purpose, and over time, again, I think we'll find ways to be more competitive on a global scale. Should, we start off in a position like we are right now where, we're like from the drone perspective, not able to make the drone, like the same drone at a comparable price to what you can make it over in China. But over time, we're going to continue to find more efficiencies to drive down that cost,
right,
make our products better. And
one of those efficiencies might be using more robotics, right? And that's one of the biggest. It's my understanding that the biggest threat to labor, assembly line type labor in this country, more jobs were taken away by technology than outsourcing to foreign countries. That's my understanding. I may be wrong on that, but so technology, if we move plants, I'm kind of taking the other side here and playing devil's advocate, but based on your argument is idealistic in nature. If we have more and more manufacturing plants brought to the United States, and the companies are able to produce these products here, but they can't compete with what we used to have, they're gonna innovate, right? And what are they going to do? Find more creative ways to use people? Or are they going to find more use of technology, especially AI coming in the picture? They're going to use technology and AI, and they're going to find ways to get rid of the jobs. So that's I think one of the arguments against what Trump is doing and how it may not work out. Again, we're going to find out after 3 years or 4 years. We're going to be able to say it either worked or it didn't.
Right. Yeah. And again, I think that could also be perceived as idealistic in the sense that, like, hey, all the robots are going to take jobs. No, they're just going to make the requirements different for new jobs. Right.
Well, that's true too. In other words, instead of people working on the assembly line, the jobs will be working on the technology.
On the robot that's
On
managing
the robot,
assembly
yeah.
line.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, but there's definitely an argument. I don't know if the scale will balance out to where it'll be the same amount of people, because if you got people on the assembly line and all these people are no longer needed and there's robots, it will probably take a lot fewer people to maintain those robots than it would be for those people, the original people, to work on the assembly line.
I think if we're at that point where it really is like, hey, the robots have taken all of like the jobs that, are really just, we need a person in this seat or to fill this role, and we can pay them any sort of like hourly rate, wage, or a decent salary, but that's a position that we want to get automated by a robot. I think by the time we really reach a saturation point there, I don't think it'll be a problem. I mean, I think beyond what we already have from a labor market problem, right? I think there's already a lot of people that just don't want to work, and I don't think that's going to change, right? And so I don't think there's going to be this like brand new like influx of like all of a sudden jobs are gone overnight, because of robots taking over
Right.
people's positions.
I don't think it'll happen overnight, but I think a major concern about U.S. manufacturing coming back to this country, and if we can't produce the products as efficiently as they could be produced by slave labor in China or wherever, we're going to do what we've always done in this country, which is innovate. And when we innovate, we're going to use technology, because that's the way, that's how innovation occurs in this
Right.
country, and the technology will be replacing human jobs.
And so I think
That's the
that
argument, I
that
think,
opens up
against it.
better jobs for people, and then it opens up more business opportunities for people as well.
Definitely better jobs, better paying jobs, because you're no longer just sitting on an assembly line putting the square cube into the square, into the square hole, and the round peg in the round peg in the round hole. You got to be a computer scientist, essentially. You got to be versed in computers and technology. So yeah, I mean, you'll probably need a computer science degree. You won't, but I'm just saying, it's not going to be a manual labor job anymore. So the jobs will be well paying, but they'll be a lot fewer.
Well, again, I think that's where, again, a lot of the jobs are going, more manual labor, right? Again, it's easy to think that, like, hey, in a very controlled environment, of course, you can replace jobs more easily with robots. But when you're talking about, like, the stereotypical trade jobs that require manual labor, there's only so far that you can go to automate. Of course, building a house, you have even 3D printers that are
Right.
building.
You're going to need carpenters and plumbers and electricians and masons. You're going to need those people to do that.
The key is we need more people focused on producing in this country more than consuming in this country, and we've had that flip flop for way too long. And I think that's it is tough. I mean, again, life is never said it was going to be easy, right? But I think, again, from the perspective of having more opportunity in this country to either get a good paying job, one that gives you purpose as well as a good income, or start a business of your own, I think is going to continue to get greater and greater through this administration. But I don't think we're going to see a loss of jobs over bringing back manufacturing. I think we're just going to see those jobs evolve, and then new types of businesses are going to pop up as a result.
I'm of the belief that these tariffs and this rebalancing of the trade situation that we have been involved in for so long, and that Trump is changing, it's going to make, and I'm not talking about just the tariff, but the rebalancing of the trade situation
Right.
is going to make those products that we've been buying overseas, it's going to make it more fair to where they're not going to be able to produce them overseas as cheaply. And Trump is in a way forcing a rebalancing such
Absolutely.
that manufacturing in this country hopefully
Makes more sense,
will
yeah.
be able to work.
Well, and that's again,
And you won't have to spend $3,000 for an iPhone.
Right.
You might spend more, but hopefully it won't be instead of 1,000, 3,000 or 4,000.
And people got to remember, like, automotive manufacturing has obviously it had its problems back in '08, for the big automotive manufacturers outside of Ford. Obviously, it was still a big problem for Ford, but Ford was able to weather the storm. But I mean, we've clearly been able to be competitive in one of the most difficult fields of manufacturing, right? In the automotive space, right? How competitive the consumer automotive space is. And that's still with, like, we're selling cars in Europe, and despite the economic, barriers that are put in place, one thing that, again, Trump opened up my eyes to, again, a very specific instance of, we have to go through just arbitrary test in Germany selling a car where German cars, they don't have to go through the same test. So it's not necessarily a financial burden that's put on the German consumer, or put on the American company in the form of the German consumer having to pay more for what would otherwise be a car that's only equivalent to something cheaper domestically, right? But in this very specific case, they have to, like, drop a bowling ball or a bowling ball size weight on the top of American cars. If it makes a dent, can't sell it in our market. None of their domestic cars have to go through that test. And so that's, again, a point to what you're saying. As much as it is trying to, make the dollars and cents add up, it's just making it more of a equal trade. If you're selling your cars in our market and, we're only charging like a 4% tariff, but you're charging us a 25% tariff, as well as adding on these regulations that we can't sell our cars, that's not going to fly anymore.
Right. And that's part of what Trump is doing. Right. And so maybe it's going to be that manufacturing in this country is doable again. And the reason it has
to be an option.
And the reason it's doable is because of the trade atmosphere that has been in existence. And Trump has been talking about that recently. He's like, no other presidents had the guts to do what I'm doing. This should have been done years ago. And he's blaming all the past administrations for allowing this to have gone on so long. Now here we are at $37 trillion debt, and
happened overnight, all thanks to him. I'm kidding, right? But that's like people are actually believing that with the straight
past
face.
20 years we've seen a massive. I remember when Bill Clinton balanced the budget. Can you believe that, man? We had a zero. They had a press conference, he and Al Gore, I remember, and they had this big whiteboard, and they had Clinton took a dry erase pencil, and it was a dollar sign. He had a big zero. We've balanced the budget, and that was a cool situation. I can't believe that was 30 years ago or so. When and here we are 30 years later, and we have this astronomical, unfathomable amount of money that is owed the American debt from the federal government. Unsustainable, and if we don't do something about it, it's going to cause problems. And again, I'm no economist, and don't ever pretend I would never want to be, but to me, because all indications say that it's going to end bad.
I just find it funny in, like, the same way that money managers, are very, like, obviously there's the exceptions like the Ray Dalio types, or you could even argue Warren Buffett to some degree is like a money manager, of some sense, but other than that, like, it just seems to me like, why are you not like this notable, big figure if you're so good at, managing money? And I kind of look at it in that same sense from an economist, if you understand like the inner workings of the economy so well, that we should just trust your opinion over, just conversations that, make sense to the everyday person. And that's, again, going back, kind of jumping around a little bit. I got yelled at for, well, you don't understand history, and it was because of the tariffs, going into in the 1930s that caused the Great Depression. You idiot, and it's like, okay, if you understand the history so well to be able to call me an idiot, then in simple terms, explain what happened. And I feel like so many times, whether it's people trusting these quote unquote experts in their field or the experts themselves, they will just rest on their laurels of the label that they've been, given or have earned, as opposed to actually just communicating their understanding and letting the idea speak for itself. Right.
Which is kind of what we're about, and what this podcast is about. we're not claiming to be experts on any of this stuff. I mean, we're not.
Right.
But we're gonna have, and we're gonna disagree, but we're gonna do it very civilly, and that's what we need in this country. And maybe that's one thing that I hope comes out of this podcast is maybe we can communicate that, we need to be discussing and we need to be disagreeing in this country, but we've got to be civil toward one another. And we got to realize we're all in this shit together.
Right. It's not right versus left. It's America. It really isn't. It's America versus the world. If you want to really group it, section us off in groups. And again, I don't even think we should be.
That's nationalistic. You're a Nazi.
Yeah.
For thinking that way.
Right. But and that's what's crazy. It's better to think about hating, or opposing other Americans than it is like, hey, come on, other Americans, let's all work together,
It's our land, it's our country, it's our culture, it's our country, it's our land, it's our founding fathers, it's our ancestors and our progeny going forward. It's our country. And I don't want to see a world government, real quickly, the Bible talking about the book of Revelation and how it talks about, there will be one world government, one currency, and it will ultimately fall into the hands of the wrong person. Like all human beings, we are flawed. And, I'm getting on a little soapbox here, but as a human being, this is why I hate socialism, and which leads to terrible things, because the idea of socialism, we're all going to share. It's going to be great. We're all going to be the same, and we're all going to share our wealth. And all. It's just wonderful in theory. The problem is that you have human beings involved in that. And we suffer from things called sin, if you want to call it that. But we're greedy, we're lustful, we have jealousy, we're lazy, all these things. It's part of being human.
Right.
And in order to fight against that, you have to have the system, I feel, that we have, which is, I feel it's the best system in the world. Checks and balances, representative government, etc. So I don't want to go off on a tangent on that, but just to say that we are flawed as human beings, and all humans have this, some more, I guess, more than others. There are better people and evil people in the world, of course, but we got to watch human beings. We got to watch, because we're flawed.
Right. And